The wind howled across the frozen mountains of northern Afghanistan, carrying with it the promise of a brutal winter storm. Staff Sergeant pulled his tactical gloves and squinted through the swirling snow. His team of 6 Navy SEALs had been inserted into this godforsaken valley 3 days ago with a simple mission: locate and eliminate a high-value Taliban commander who had been coordinating attacks on coalition supply convoys. What should have been a straightforward operation had quickly turned into a nightmare. The intel was wrong, dead wrong. Instead of finding a small compound with maybe a dozen fighters, they had stumbled into what appeared to be a major Taliban stronghold. Estimated at least 60 enemy combatants, possibly more, scattered throughout a network of caves and reinforced positions carved into the mountainside. "Sierra 6, this is Sierra 1, whispered into his radio, calling his team leader, Lieutenant James. "I've got eyes on at least 20 tangos moving through the rocks about 200 meters to our east. They're definitely searching for us." His voice crackled back through the static. "Copy that." Williams spotted another group moving up from the south. "We're surrounded and the storm's getting worse. Can't see more than 50 feet in any direction now." The team had taken shelter in a shallow cave halfway up the mountain, but knew it was only a matter of time before the enemy found them. They were outnumbered 10-1, running low on ammunition, and the weather was making it impossible for air support or extraction. Petty Officer First Class David Williams crawled up beside, his face grim. "Boss wants to see you. We got problems." Followed Williams deeper into the cave where the rest of the team had gathered around. The lieutenant's weathered face showed the strain of command as he studied a crumpled map by the light of a red-filtered flashlight. "We're in a bad spot," began, his voice steady despite the circumstances. "The storm's knocked out most of our communications. I managed to get through to command briefly about an hour ago, but they can't get birds in the air with this weather. We're on our own until it clears, and that might not be for another 12 to 18 hours. Hospital Corpsman Second Class Tony Martinez shook his head. "Sir, we don't have 18 hours. I've been treating his leg wound, but he needs proper medical attention, and we're down to about 4 magazines per man." Petty Officer Second Class Mike, the team's explosives expert, tried to shift his position and winced in pain. He'd taken shrapnel from a grenade during their earlier firefight, and despite Martinez's field treatment, the wound was getting worse. "What about moving to a better position?" asked Petty Officer Second Class Jake, the team's communications specialist. "Maybe we can find somewhere more defensible." Studied the map again. "The problem is, we don't know the terrain like they do. In this storm, we'd be moving blind, and we'd leave tracks they could follow. At least here we have some cover and a good view of the approaches." Moved to the cave entrance and peered out into the swirling white. The snow was coming down even heavier now, and the wind was picking up. Through brief breaks in the storm, he could see muzzle flashes in the distance. The enemy was closing in, using the cover of the blizzard to advance. "Contact," Williams shouted from his position on the other side of the cave. "Multiple tangos moving up the north slope, about 100 meters and closing." The team immediately took defensive positions, shouldered his M4 carbine and tried to acquire targets through the storm. The visibility was so poor that the enemy fighters appeared and disappeared like ghosts in the snow. He fired controlled bursts at shadowy figures, but it was difficult to tell if he was hitting anything. The sound of gunfire echoed off the mountain walls as the Taliban fighters pressed their attack. AK-47 rounds sparked off the rocks around the cave entrance, forcing the SEALs to keep their heads down. Coordinated their defensive fire, making sure they didn't waste ammunition on targets they couldn't properly see. "They're trying to flank us on the east side," Martinez called out. "I can see movement in the rocks about 70 meters out." "Can you get through to anyone on the radio?" asked. The communications specialist shook his head grimly. "Nothing, sir. This storm is jamming everything. Even our GPS is acting up." Could feel the situation deteriorating rapidly. The enemy was being smart, using the storm as cover while gradually tightening the noose around their position. In weather like this, the Taliban's knowledge of the local terrain gave them a huge advantage. "How much ammo do we have left?" asked. The team quickly checked their magazines. The answer wasn't encouraging. Martinez had 3 full magazines plus a partial. Williams had 4, had 3, had 4 plus his partial, had 5. Who was having trouble moving had 6 but couldn't effectively fight from his position. That's maybe 25 magazines total, calculated. At this rate, we'll be down to throwing rocks in an hour. The enemy fire was getting more accurate as they moved closer. Could hear voices shouting in Pashto, coordinating the attack. These weren't just random fighters. They were organized and disciplined, probably experienced veterans who knew how to fight in these mountains. "Sir, they're bringing up what looks like a machine gun," Williams reported. "I can see them setting up on that ridge to our northwest." Cursed under his breath. A machine gun could pin them down completely, making it impossible to return effective fire. And once they were suppressed, the enemy could move in for the kill. "We need to take out that gun position," said. "If they get it set up, we're finished." "With what?" asked. "We don't have any heavy weapons, and RPG got damaged in the earlier fight." The machine gun opened fire, sending a stream of bullets into the rock face above their heads. Chips of stone rained down as the gunner walked his fire across the cave entrance, forcing the seals to press themselves against the walls. Tried to return fire, but the machine gun's position was too well protected. Every time he exposed himself to take a shot, the gunner forced him back into cover. The enemy was using classic mountain warfare tactics, establishing fire superiority before moving in assault teams. "They've got us pinned," Williams said, stating the obvious. Looked around at his men, seeing the same grim determination on their faces that he felt in his own heart. They were Navy SEALs, trained for exactly these kinds of impossible situations. They wouldn't go down without a fight. "All right, listen up," said. "They want a fight, we'll give them one. You and Williams take the left side. Martinez, you're with me on the right. Stay with and keep trying the radio. Maybe this storm will break enough for you to get through." The machine gun continued its deadly chatter, joined now by rifle fire from at least a dozen positions. The enemy was moving closer, using fire and movement tactics to advance under the cover of their supporting weapons. Estimated they had maybe 10 minutes before the assault teams would be close enough to rush their position. He thought about his wife back home in San, about the promise he'd made to come back safely from this deployment. He thought about his team, good men who deserved better than to die in an unmarked cave on a frozen mountain. But most of all, he thought about the mission and the oath he'd taken to never leave a fallen comrade behind. The storm seemed to be getting worse, if that was possible. The wind was now howling like a living thing, and the snow was coming down so thick that couldn't see more than 20 feet outside the cave. It was the kind of weather that could kill a man in minutes if he wasn't properly equipped. But weather worked both ways. If it was hard for the SEALs to see and fight, it was just as hard for the enemy, and had just gotten an idea that might give them a chance. The machine gun fire suddenly stopped, probably so the gunner could change his ammunition belt. In that brief moment of relative quiet, heard something that made him freeze. It was a different sound, almost lost in the wind. The crack of a high-powered rifle firing from somewhere up the mountain. One of the enemy fighters who had been moving toward their position suddenly spun and fell, a red stain spreading across the snow where he lay. Then another shot, and another fighter dropped. The remaining Taliban soldiers began shouting in confusion, looking around wildly for the source of the sniper fire. Looked at Williams, who had also noticed the change in the enemy's behavior. "Did you hear that?" whispered. Williams nodded, his eyes wide. "Someone's up there shooting at them, but who?" The machine gun tried to start firing again, but after just a few rounds, it went silent. Through the storm, could barely make out the gunner slumped over his weapon. Another perfect shot from their mysterious savior. Had noticed the change, too. "What the hell is happening out there?" "Someone's picking them off, sir," reported. "Long-range precision fire from somewhere up the mountain." The enemy fighters were now in complete disarray. Their coordinated attack had broken down as they tried to figure out where the sniper fire was coming from. Some of them were falling back to more protected positions, while others were firing wildly into the storm, hopping to hit their unseen attacker. "This might be our chance," said, "if we can break out while they're confused." But wasn't ready to move yet. He wanted to see more of what their mysterious ally could do. The sniper was clearly a professional, taking precise shots in conditions that would challenge even the most skilled marksman. Each shot was deliberate, calculated, and deadly accurate. The Taliban fighters were beginning to retreat, dragging their wounded with them. The psychological effect of being picked off by an invisible sniper in a blizzard was devastating their morale. These were tough, experienced fighters, but even they had their limits. "Who do you think it is?" Martinez asked, still keeping his rifle trained on the approaches to their cave. "Could be one of our guys," suggested. "Maybe a Marine sniper team got inserted and we didn't know about it." Shook his head. "No way. Command would have told us if there were other assets in the area. This is someone else entirely." The sniper fire continued for another few minutes, then gradually tapered off as the enemy fighters pulled back to safer positions. The immediate threat to the SEAL team had been eliminated, but they were still trapped on the mountain with limited ammunition and no way to communicate with friendly forces. Continued to scan the slopes above them, trying to spot their savior. But the storm was too thick, and whoever was up there was obviously well concealed. All he could do was wait and hope that their mysterious guardian angel would make contact. The wind continued to howl, carrying with it the promise that this was far from over. The silence that followed the sniper's intervention was eerie, broken only by the constant howl of the wind and the occasional distant shout from the retreating Taliban fighters. Kept his rifle ready, scanning the white curtain of snow for any sign of movement. His team remained in defensive positions, unsure whether their mysterious savior was friend or foe. 20 minutes passed before made the decision to investigate. "Williams, you're with me. We're going to move out about 50 meters and see if we can make contact with whoever's up there. Martinez, you stay here with and, if this goes sideways, you fall back deeper into the cave system." Checked his gear one more time and followed out into the storm. The cold hit him like a physical blow, and within seconds his exposed skin was numb. The snow was knee-deep and getting deeper by the minute. Each step required considerable effort, and he could feel the ice crystals forming on his eyebrows and tactical beard. They moved carefully up the slope, using hand signals to communicate over the roar of the wind. His boots crunched through the snow as he tried to follow the path of least resistance through the rocky terrain. The visibility was so poor that Williams, walking just 10 feet ahead, occasionally disappeared completely in the swirling white. Stopped suddenly and raised his fist, the signal to freeze. Through the storm, could make out a dark shape moving among the rocks about 30 meters ahead. Too tall and bulky to be one of the Taliban fighters they'd been fighting. This person was wearing what appeared to be a white camouflage outfit and carrying a large rifle with an optical scope. The figure noticed them at almost the same moment and turned in their direction. Tensed, ready to bring his weapon to bear, but the stranger made no aggressive moves. Instead, the person raised one hand in a gesture that was clearly meant to be peaceful. "American," the figure called out over the wind. The voice was definitely speaking English, but with an accent couldn't immediately place. "U.S. Navy," shouted back. "Identify yourself." The stranger began moving toward them and got his first good look at their rescuer. It was a woman, probably in her early 30s, with pale features and intelligent green eyes. Her white winter camouflage was military grade, and she moved with the confident precision of a trained soldier. The rifle she carried was a custom-built precision weapon that estimated could make accurate shots at extreme range. "Captain, Russian military intelligence," she said as she approached. Her English was excellent with just a slight accent. "I have been tracking the same Taliban cell you were hunting. When I heard the firefight, I came to investigate." Exchanged a glance with. A Russian intelligence officer operating alone in Afghanistan was definitely not something they'd expected to encounter. His hand stayed near his weapon as he processed this new development. "You saved our lives," said carefully. "But I have to ask, what exactly is a Russian officer doing in this particular valley?" Smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "The same thing you are, I suspect. The Taliban commander you were hunting has been causing problems for Russian interests as well. Some of the weapons he has been using against your convoys were stolen from a Russian arms shipment. My government takes such theft very seriously." She gestured toward the cave where the other SEALs were waiting. "Your wounded man needs medical attention, and this storm is not going to break any time soon. I have a shelter about 2 kilometers from here, better protected than your current position. I suggest we move there before the Taliban regroup and come back with reinforcements." Williams looked skeptical. "How do we know this isn't some kind of trap?" His expression remained calm. "If I wanted to kill you, you would already be dead. I had clear shots at all of you from my position. Instead, I eliminated the immediate threat to your team." She paused, studying their faces. Besides, in this weather, we all have a better chance of survival if we work together. Considered the offer. Their current position was defensible but exposed, and its condition was deteriorating. The Russian officer had proven her skill and had already demonstrated that she could have killed them if that had been her intention. Sometimes in combat, you had to make decisions based on incomplete information. All right, Captain, we'll come with you. But understand that if this is some kind of setup, things will go badly for everyone involved. Nodded, understood, and please call me, we are allies in this storm, yes. They made their way back to the cave where the rest of the SEAL team was waiting. Could see the surprise on his teammates' faces when they saw the Russian officer. Martinez looked particularly skeptical, his hand never moving far from his sidearm. This is Captain, announced. She's the one who took out the machine gun nest. She's offered us shelter until the storm passes. Knelt beside and examined his wound with professional competence. This needs proper cleaning and sutures. I have medical supplies at my shelter, and it is warm and dry, much better than freezing to death in this cave. Looked up at her with a mix of gratitude and confusion. Thanks for the help, ma'am, but I have to say, you're not exactly what I was expecting when I woke up this morning. Smile was genuine this time. Life rarely gives us what we expect, does it? Can you walk, or do we need to carry you? I can walk, said, though could see the pain in his eyes. They gathered their gear and prepared to move out. Led the way, navigating through the storm with the confidence of someone who knew the terrain intimately. Realized that she must have been operating in this area for some time to have such detailed knowledge of the mountains. The journey to her shelter took almost an hour. They moved through a series of narrow valleys and rocky passes that provided some protection from the worst of the wind. Set a steady pace that was fast enough to keep them warm but not so fast that the wounded couldn't keep up. Found himself walking beside the Russian officer for part of the journey. That was some impressive shooting back there. Where did you train? First, then military intelligence, replied. I have been operating in these mountains for 6 months, learning the patterns of the local Taliban groups, has been a particular target of interest. 6 months alone, that's a long time to be operating without support. Glanced at him. I am not entirely alone, but my mission requires discretion. Your government and mine do not always see eye to eye on how to handle problems in this region. The shelter turned out to be a natural cave system that had modified with military engineering. She had created a hidden entrance that was almost impossible to spot from outside, and the interior had been divided into different areas for sleeping, equipment storage, and communications. A small heating unit provided warmth without creating visible smoke, and the walls were lined with supplies that suggested she had been planning for extended operations. Impressive, said as he looked around. You've been busy. When you operate alone, preparation is everything, replied. She immediately went to work on his wound, cleaning it thoroughly and applying proper field dressings. Her medical skills were clearly professional level. Martinez set up a defensive position near the entrance while tried once again to establish radio contact with their base. Watched the communications specialist work for a few minutes, then disappeared into another section of the cave. She returned with a military radio that was clearly more sophisticated than standard U.S. field equipment. Try this frequency, she said, adjusting the settings. The Russian military has been monitoring communications in this valley. Your base has been trying to contact you for the past 2 hours. His eyes widened as clear voices suddenly came through the speaker. Sierra Team, this is Overwatch. Do you copy? Over. Grabbed the microphone. Overwatch, this is Sierra 1. We copy loud and clear. Our position has changed and we have 1 wounded. Storm has us pinned down, but we're in a secure location. Over. Copy Sierra 1. Weather forecast shows the storm breaking in approximately 4 hours. We'll have extraction birds in the air as soon as conditions permit. What's your current status? Over. 6 personnel, 1 wounded but stable. We've encountered heavy resistance, but the immediate threat has been neutralized. We'll need coordinates for pickup once the weather clears. Over. Notice that didn't mention their Russian ally. That was probably wise, given the complex political implications of the situation. Had been listening to the conversation with interest. Your extraction will be complicated. The Taliban know you are in this area, and they will be watching for helicopters once the storm passes. Is still alive, and he will want revenge for the losses his men suffered today. Williams looked up from cleaning his rifle. You seem to know a lot about this character. I have been hunting him for 6 months, replied. He is intelligent, ruthless, and he knows these mountains better than almost anyone. He will not simply retreat and forget about you. This has become personal. Finished his radio conversation and turned to, what exactly do you know about his capabilities? Moved to a map she had mounted on the cave wall. It was covered with notations in Russian, but the terrain features were clear enough. Has approximately 80 fighters under his command, divided into 3 main groups. He uses these caves and valleys as his base of operations, and he has escape routes planned through the mountain passes. He also has sources of information in several of the local villages. She pointed to various locations on the map. Your extraction helicopter will have to come in through one of these valleys. We'll have observers posted at all the logical landing zones. He will know you are leaving before your aircraft is halfway here. Studied the map, recognizing several landmarks from their 3-day mission. What do you suggest? We eliminate before your extraction arrives. With him dead, his fighters will scatter back to their villages. They follow him out of respect and fear, not ideology. Remove the leader and the threat disappears. Martinez looked skeptical. 6 SEALs and 1 Russian agent against 80 Taliban fighters. Those aren't great odds. Smile was predatory. Not 6 SEALs. 1 sniper operating alone while you provide distraction and support. I know where his command post is located. In this storm, I can get close enough for a killing shot. But I will need your team to create enough noise elsewhere to mask my approach. Considered the proposal. It was risky, but it had the advantage of eliminating a high-value target while improving their own chances of safe extraction. And they would be working with someone who clearly knew the terrain and the enemy better than they did. What kind of distraction did you have in mind? Pointed to another location on the map. There is a weapons cache about 1 kilometer from his position. If your explosives expert is capable of working with his injury, we could destroy it. The explosion would draw attention away from the command post and give me the opportunity I need. Looked up from where he was resting. I can handle explosives work, ma'am. Might need some help moving, but my hands work fine. The plan was dangerous, but had to admit it was better than sitting in the cave waiting for the Taliban to mount another attack, and had already proven her competence under fire. Outside, the storm continued to rage, but he could sense that the worst of it was passing. Soon they would have to make their move, one way or another. The question was whether they could trust their new ally completely, or if they were walking into an even deadlier trap. The storm began to weaken just before dawn, the howling wind gradually subsiding to a steady whisper. Checked her watch and then the weather conditions outside. We have a window of opportunity. The snow has stopped, but the cloud cover will provide concealment for another 2 hours. After that, visibility improves and our chances decrease significantly. Gathered his team for a final briefing. Had sketched out the tactical situation on a piece of paper, showing the relative positions of the weapons cache, command post, and their current location. The plan was straightforward but required precise timing and coordination. Williams and Martinez will move with me to the weapons cache, explained. Stays herewith to maintain radio contact and provide overwatch. Approaches the command post from the north while we create the distraction. Questions. Raised his hand. What happens if the extraction birds show up early? We abort and move to the primary landing zone, replied. But according to the weather report, we've got at least 3 hours before they can get here safely. Shouldered her rifle and checked her equipment one final time. Noticed that she moved with the same methodical precision he'd observed in the best snipers he'd worked with. Every piece of gear had its place. Every motion was deliberate and economical. One more thing, said as they prepared to leave the shelter. If something goes wrong and I don't make it back, there is intelligence in my equipment that your government will find valuable. Information about Russian operations in this region, Taliban supply networks, things that could save American lives. Make sure it gets to the right people. Caught the implication. She wasn't entirely confident about coming back from this mission. How about we all make it back instead? Smile was small but genuine. That would be preferable, yes. They moved out into the gray pre-dawn light. The snow crunched under their boots, but the wind had died down enough that they could move more quietly than during the storm. Led them for the first kilometer, navigating through the rocky terrain with the sure-footed confidence of someone who had traveled these paths many times before. At the predetermined split point, she clasped shoulder briefly. "Give me 30 minutes to get into position, then light up that weapon's cache. Make it loud and bright. We'll send most of his men to investigate, leaving his command post lightly defended." 30 minutes, confirmed. "Good hunting, Captain." Melted into the rocks and scattered snow like a ghost. Watched her disappear and realized he was genuinely impressed. Whatever else could be said about their situation, they were working with a true professional. The SEAL team continued toward the weapons cache, moving more slowly now that they were approaching enemy-controlled territory. The cache was located in a small valley that had identified from intercepted Taliban communications. According to her intelligence, it contained ammunition, explosives, and small arms that fighters used to resupply between operations. They reached the edge of the valley with 10 minutes to spare. Used his binoculars to survey the area, counting at least 6 guards positioned around the cache site. The weapons were stored in a series of wooden crates stacked near the mouth of a shallow cave, protected from the weather but easily accessible for transport. 6 tangos visible, reported quietly. Standard security patrol pattern, they're not expecting trouble. Checked his watch, 3 minutes. Charges should turn that whole valley into a fireworks show. The explosion, when it came, was everything they could have hoped for and more. Had clearly put all his expertise into creating the maximum possible destruction. The initial blast was followed by a series of secondary explosions as the stored ammunition cooked off. Flames shot hundreds of feet into the air, visible for miles despite the low cloud cover. The Taliban guards reacted exactly as had predicted. Within minutes, armed fighters were streaming toward the explosion site from positions all across the mountain. Watched through his scope as groups of men abandoned their posts and ran toward the valley where the weapons cache had been obliterated. "That should have gotten their attention," Martinez said with satisfaction. "Might be wounded, but he hasn't lost his touch with explosives." "Was already moving. Time to go. It's got her distraction, now we need to get to the extraction point before figures out what really happened." They began moving toward the primary landing zone, a flat area about 2 kilometers away that could accommodate the rescue helicopters. But they had only traveled about half the distance when his voice crackled over the radio. "Sierra 1, this is base. We've got a problem. Pinned down at the command post, didn't take the bait completely. He left a squad of his best fighters to protect him, and they've got her trapped." Felt his stomach drop. "Can she get out on her own?" "Negative. From what I can see through the scope, she's in a fighting position about 200 meters from the command post. She's got good cover, but no way to retreat without exposing herself to crossfire." Made the decision instantly. "Change of plans, we go get her." "Sir, the extraction birds will be here in less than an hour," Williams pointed out. "If we miss that pickup." "We don't leave people behind," said firmly. "That includes Russian intelligence officers who saved our lives. You and Martinez move to support. Williams, you're with me. We'll approach from the south and try to draw some of the fire away from her position." They moved fast through the rocky terrain, using the scattered boulders and snow-covered depressions for cover. Could hear gunfire echoing from the direction of the command post, the distinctive crack of precision rifle mixed with the chatter of AK-47s. As they got closer, could see the tactical situation more clearly. Had found an excellent sniper position with good cover and clear fields of fire, but she was surrounded on 3 sides. Every time she tried to shift position, enemy fighters forced her back with accurate rifle fire. "Sierra 1, this is Overwatch," his voice came through their earpieces. "It's taken out at least 4 fighters, including one who looked like an officer, but she's running low on ammunition and they're closing in." Could see fighters moving through the rocks, using fire and movement tactics to gradually tighten the circle around his position. These weren't random village fighters. They were experienced combatants who knew how to conduct small unit operations. "Martinez, you see that cluster of rocks about 50 meters to east?" Pointed to a defensive position where 3 Taliban fighters were providing covering fire. "Roger that. I can get an angle on them from here." "Take them out. I'll move closer and try to get attention, let her know we're here." Martinez's M4 carbine began firing controlled bursts and saw 2 of the Taliban fighters go down immediately. The third tried to return fire, but was forced to keep his head down by Martinez's accurate shooting. Low crawled through the snow until he was within shouting distance of his position. "American forces, 50 meters to your south. Can you move?" Her voice came back immediately, calm despite the circumstances. "Negative. 3 fighters on my north side, 2 on the west. If I move, they have clear shots." Assessed the situation quickly. Was right. Any attempt to retreat would expose her to crossfire from multiple positions. But staying where she wasn't viable either, because the enemy was slowly working their way closer. "We need to hit them all at once," reported. "Simultaneous fire on all their positions. It's the only way to give a chance to move." "Copy that. Williams is in position on the north side. On my mark. 3, 2, 1, execute." The coordinated attack was devastating. 4 SEAL rifles opened fire simultaneously on the Taliban positions, catching the fighters in the open as they tried to advance on position. The suppressing fire was so intense that the surviving enemies immediately went to ground, giving the opening she needed. She moved like a professional, bounding from cover to cover while the SEALs maintained their suppressing fire. Could see her tactical competence in every movement. She wasted no motion, took only the shots that counted, and never exposed herself to unnecessary risk. "I'm clear," called out as she reached a position where the SEAL team could provide better support. "Is in the command post with at least 6 guards. I had a shot earlier but couldn't take it because of the covering fire." Looked at his watch. "Extraction birds will be here in 20 minutes. We need to finish this and get to the landing zone." Pointed toward the command post, a reinforced position built into the rocks about 100 meters away. "Knows we are here now. He will be preparing to escape through the back tunnels. If we do not act immediately, he will disappear into the mountains and we will never find him again." Could see the tactical problem. The command post was well defended and positioned on higher ground. A direct assault would be costly and time-consuming, and they simply didn't have enough time before the extraction helicopters arrived. "What if we don't assault directly?" suggested. "You said you had a shot at earlier. Can you get that shot again if we provide enough distraction?" Studied the terrain for a moment, then nodded. "Yes, there is a position about 300 meters to the east where I can get a clear line of sight into the command post. But I would need at least 2 minutes to get there, and the approach is across open ground." 2 minutes, said. "We can give you that. Full assault on the command post, maximum noise and confusion. When you have your shot, take it." Checked her rifle and remaining ammunition. "Understood. When you hear my shot, pull back immediately and head for the extraction point. Do not wait for me to catch up." "We're all leaving together," said firmly. "Perhaps," replied. "But if something goes wrong, do not compromise the mission for one person. That is not how professionals operate." Before anyone could argue, she was moving, sprinting across the open ground toward her new firing position. Watched her go and realized he was genuinely worried about her survival. Somewhere during this impossible day, the Russian intelligence officer had stopped being a potential enemy and become a teammate. "All right," said. "Let's give the lady the best distraction we can manage. Full automatic, maximum aggression. Make them think we're trying to overrun their position." The final assault was brief, but intense. The 4 SEALs poured fire into the command post, forcing the defenders to keep their heads down while moved into position. Could see muzzle flashes from inside the fortified position as guards returned fire, but the SEAL team's superior training and equipment gave them a decisive advantage. The single crack of his precision rifle cut through the noise of the firefight like a knife. Saw her target through his scope, a tall figure in expensive clothing who had been directing the defense from inside the command post. The man spun and fell, and immediately the volume of return fire from the defenders decreased dramatically. "Target eliminated," his voice came over the radio. "Is down. Recommend immediate withdrawal." The Taliban fighters began pulling back almost immediately. Without their leader, their coordinated defense collapsed into individual survival instincts. Ordered the withdrawal, and the SEAL team began bounding back toward the extraction point. Caught up with them halfway to the landing zone, moving fast but under control. "It is finished," she reported. "Will not be troubling anyone again." They reached the landing zone just as the distinctive sound of helicopter rotors echoed across the valley. 2 Black Hawks were approaching fast, staying low to avoid potential ground fire. could see that the crews were ready for a combat extraction, door gunners scanning for threats as they prepared to land. "What about you?" asked as they prepared for pickup. "Those helicopters are U.S. military. I'm not sure they're going to be comfortable giving you a ride." Smiled and shook her head. "I have my own extraction arranged. Russian helicopters will be here within the hour to collect me and my equipment, but thank you for the offer." She extended her hand then to each of the other SEALs in turn. When she reached, she paused. "It has been an honor to fight alongside true professionals. Perhaps our governments will find more opportunities for this kind of cooperation." "Stay safe out there," said, meaning it. "You as well, take care of your wounded man." The Black Hawks touched down in a whirlwind of snow and rotor wash. The SEALs moved quickly toward the aircraft, supporting the injured between them. As climbed aboard, he looked back to see melting back into the rocks and snow, disappearing as completely as she had appeared. 30 minutes later, as the helicopter carried them away from the mountains toward the safety of their base, reflected on the mission. They had started out hunting one Taliban commander and ended up working with a Russian intelligence officer to eliminate a mutual threat. It wasn't the kind of outcome anyone could have predicted, but it was effective. Was already preparing his after-action report, trying to figure out how to explain role in their success without creating an international incident. That was above's pay grade, but he hoped the higher-ups would recognize that sometimes cooperation could be more effective than confrontation. As the mountains fell away below them, thought about, wondering if they would ever cross paths again. In a world of shifting alliances and complex threats, he suspected that unconventional partnerships might become more common. Today had proven that when professionals recognized each other across national boundaries, remarkable things could be accomplished. The storm was finally over, and they were all going home.